In our headlines on this Friday, February 21st, here in South Korea. The final hearing of the impeachment trial to decide on the political fate of President Yoon Suk-yeol will take place next Tuesday, after which a verdict by the Constitutional Court is expected by mid-March. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., Deputy Trade Minister Park Jong-won formally requests an exemption from Trump tariffs, citing the presence of the free trade agreement between South Korea and the U.S. And the U.S. cancels a scheduled joint press conference between Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy and U.S. envoy Keith Kellogg following their talks in Kyiv about ending Russian aggression. President Yoon Suk-yeol's impeachment trial will come to a close next Tuesday with the 11th hearing that will see the President and the Parliamentary Impeachment Panel sharing their final remarks. Our Oh Soo-young reports.
President Yoon Suk-yeol's impeachment trial will conclude next Tuesday with his final statement at the Constitutional Court. The court announced Thursday at Yoon's 10th trial hearing that the next and final session would be held on February 25th, some 74 days after the impeachment vote passed at the National Assembly. The bench will review remaining evidence before the National Assembly's legal team and the President's lawyers each make their closing arguments. Then the Assembly's panel co-chair Chung Chung-nae and President Yoon will deliver their final remarks. The court on Thursday held the last round of witness examinations.
The questions focused on whether the President went through proper cabinet procedures before declaring martial law and whether he'd ordered arrests of key politicians and judicial figures.
First up was Prime Minister Han Duck-soo, who said there had been anomalies in procedure and substance compared to a standard cabinet meeting. He said the defence minister had not consulted him before recommending martial law to the President, as required by the Constitution, and said no minutes were taken. Han stopped short of judging whether or not a legitimate cabinet meeting took place, saying that should be determined through investigative and judicial procedures. Former National Intelligence Service Deputy Director Hong Jang-won, who was a witness earlier this month, returned for further questioning by Yoon's legal team. Hong previously testified that he'd made note of 14 to 16 figures to arrest under martial law, claiming that he'd written it in the night outside the residence of his boss, Director Cho Tae-yong. He received the names from Defense Counterintelligence Commander Yoon, who Hong phoned as the President had told him to help out the commander. But Hong changed his words on Thursday, saying he had been in his office after all. His boss told the court last week that Hong had lied about his whereabouts, citing CCTV footage. As Hong and Yoon's lawyers clashed over the veracity of his note, which was reproduced and altered various times, the President spoke out, saying the debate misses the point. He said he'd called Hong to encourage him to work with Yoon hunting down spies, without mentioning martial law. He pointed out that Hong was the one who called the commander, made notes, and then held on to them until he was dismissed from the NIS. National Police Agency Chief Cho Ji-woo also stood witness after 2 absences due to illness. He refused to answer most questions due to his own criminal case, but said he testified truthfully to prosecutors. Cho had said Yoon called him 6 times on December 3rd and told him to arrest lawmakers. Based on past presidential impeachment trials, a verdict is likely to be reached within 2 weeks around March 11th. Former President Park Geun-hye's impeachment was upheld in 11 days, while former President Roh Moo-hyun's was dismissed in 14 days. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
In a separate development, the National Police Agency has booked President Yoon Suk-yeol on charges of obstructing the execution of an arrest warrant. Our Shin Ha-young explains.
President Yoon Suk-yeol has been booked by the NPA for allegedly using the Presidential Security Service to block investigators' attempts to detain him last month over his declaration of martial law. According to police on Friday, Yoon has been booked on charges of special obstruction of public duty. However, as a sitting president, he cannot be criminally prosecuted. The Special Police Investigation Unit looking into the martial law declaration has reportedly obtained text messages between Yoon and PSS Deputy Chief Kim Sung-hoon regarding efforts to block the execution of the warrant to detain him. It was confirmed that they exchanged messages through the US-based messaging app Signal on January 3rd during the first attempt to serve the warrant. 4 days later, they exchanged messages again, with Yoon ordering the security team to intervene if a second attempt was made. Kim relayed the order to his staff, but they refused to comply, leading to Yoon's arrest on January 15th. The police did not disclose the details of the messages. Meanwhile, the Special Investigation Unit announced on Friday that they had transferred the case of 6 military officials, including Won Chun-hee, head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, to the Corruption Investigation Office for high-ranking officials. The officials were booked on charges of insurrection. The CIO launched a search and seizure procedure the same day at Won's house and office. It is investigating allegations that Won met with former Defense Minister Kim Yong-hyun and former commander of the Defense Intelligence Command Moon Sang-ho the day before Yoon's martial law declaration to discuss its imposition. 신하영, Arirang News.
South Korea is seeking an exemption from the Trump administration's tariff campaign, given the presence of the free trade agreement between the two countries. According to the Trade Ministry here on this Friday, Deputy Trade Minister Park Jong-won formally made a request to this end during talks in Washington this week with officials from the White House, the Commerce Department, and the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative. He also reportedly called for mutually beneficial trade endeavors while underscoring the substantial investment in the U.S. made by Korean companies in recent times. Korea's trade watchdog has recommended anti-dumping tariffs on Chinese steel plate imports following an investigation into their impact on the domestic market. Our Lee Seung-jae has details.
Back in July of last year, Hyundai Steel filed a complaint with the government against low-priced Chinese thick steel plates. 3 months later, the Korea Trade Commission launched an investigation into the case. The nation's trade watchdog on Thursday made a preliminary decision to impose anti-dumping tariffs on thick steel plates being imported from China after identifying possible damage to the domestic industry. In its latest recommendation, the KTC will ask the Ministry of Economy and Finance to impose an anti-dumping duty of between 27.91% and 38.02%. The final decision on the levies is expected to be announced 5 months from now. The latest recommendation by the KTC comes amid the Trump administration's decision to impose 25% tariffs on all steel and aluminum imports starting next month. Economists say the higher tariff on steel and aluminum imports to the U.S. will lead to Chinese steel products being flooded into other regions, such as Europe and Southeast Asia, leading South Korean steelmakers to face tougher price competition. Experts also say the domestic steel industry has been hit hard due to oversupply from China and a slowdown in domestic demand. While the domestic demand for thick plates fell in 2023, the proportion of thick plates being imported from China has increased. Last year alone, Chinese imports accounted for 17% of all thick steel plate purchases in the country. The domestic thick plate market is estimated to be around 8 trillion won, or over $5.5 billion. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
On the local trade front, exports during the first 20 days of February surged on year on the back of global chip demand. According to the Korea Customs Service on this Friday, exports amounted to $35.3 billion during this period, up 16% on year. Semiconductor shipments overseas soared over 22%, while passenger vehicles and auto parts also jumped more than 40% and 9%, respectively. Given this latest performance, South Korea logged a trade surplus of $800 million. A scheduled joint press conference was cancelled following talks between Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy and U.S. envoy Keith Kellogg at the request of the U.S. Our Chairman Jung covers this event and more.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy and U.S.-Ukraine envoy Keith Kellogg met in Kyiv on Thursday and held what Zelenskyy called a productive meeting. Zelenskyy shared on social media that they had a detailed conversation about the battlefield situation, the return of Ukrainian prisoners of war, and effective security guarantees, emphasizing the importance of U.S.-Ukraine relations. However, the meeting did not result in significant breakthroughs in securing U.S. support, as evidenced by the cancellation of a planned joint press conference at the request of the U.S. What was supposed to be a media event turned into a brief photo opportunity without remarks or questions. Kellogg's visit to Kyiv came amid escalating tensions between U.S. President Donald Trump and Zelenskyy. On Wednesday, Ukraine rejected U.S. demands for $500 billion in minerals as repayment for wartime aid, citing inadequate support from Washington and a lack of security guarantees. Trump's frustration with Zelenskyy is apparent, as he believes Zelenskyy has not taken advantage of the opportunities presented.
Look, President Trump is obviously very frustrated right now with President Zelenskyy. The fact that he hasn't come to the table, that he hasn't been willing to take this opportunity that we have offered. I think he eventually will get to that point, and I hope so very quickly.
Additionally, the U.S. is resisting putting the blame on Russia for the war by opposing the inclusion of Russian aggression in a G7 joint statement marking the war's third anniversary. This follows Trump's comments blaming Ukraine for the war and calling Zelenskyy a dictator without elections. He has also proposed inviting Russia back to the G7. Next week, Trump is set to meet with the leaders of France and the UK to discuss strategies for ending the war in Ukraine and post-war planning. European nations have so far been left without a clear role in the peace talks. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, on the margins of the G20 foreign ministers meeting in South Africa, Foreign Minister Cho Tae-yeol sat down separately with his British and Australian counterparts. Now, on the agenda were diverse global matters, including Russia's invasion of Ukraine and North Korea's illicit military support. Top diplomats are gathered in Johannesburg for the first G20 ministerial meeting of the year, centered around the theme of solidarity, equality, sustainability. Now, notably, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio announced his absence from the meeting, finding fault with the theme of the latest talks for resembling diversity, equity and inclusion initiatives, which the Trump administration reportedly opposes. In Korea, it's not the cherry on top, it's the strawberry. And advances in farming technology here have made it possible for us to indulge in them all year round, as their popularity also takes them from our tables to those beyond borders. Our Song Yoo-jin has this tasty tale.
From cakes and tarts to canapes and salads and even sandwiches, strawberries dominate bakeries and restaurants across Korea this time of year. But their appeal isn't just local. While Southeast Asia has long been a key market, Korean strawberries are now expanding into new regions. Compared to 2021, exports to the Middle East jumped 40 times last year, while U.S. exports increased threefold.
Until the early 2000s, Japanese strawberries dominated exports to Hong Kong and Southeast Asia. But in 2002, Korea developed the Maehang variety, which has firmer flesh, a longer shelf life, and a sweeter taste, ideal for export. That was the turning point.
It all started here. So here, the Strawberry Research Institute in Nonsan City, Chungcheongnam-do Province, is where Korea's signature strawberry varieties like this are developed. So far, researchers here have cultivated over a dozen unique varieties. This institute introduced the internationally popular Maehang and then Seolhyang in 2005, which holds an 80% share of the domestic market. It's also home to trending varieties like Kingsberry, as large as a fist, and Vitaberry, known for its high vitamin content. Developing new strains is a rigorous process, typically taking 5 to 7 years.
We do it through selective breeding with a focus on taste and yield. The flavor must stand out to attract consumers, and a high-yield variety ensures stable supply.
This commitment has shaped the iconic flavor of Korean strawberries.
Korean strawberries offer a unique sweet-tart balance, which is different to many tropical fruits, for example. They also have a juicy texture and softer bite, which makes them especially popular among international consumers.
But the journey doesn't stop here, with researchers working to develop the breakthrough variety.
We're developing new varieties with improved durability for the sake of distribution. At the same time, as climate conditions change, we're also focusing on breeding disease-resistant strawberries.
It's a success story that's getting sweeter. And it looks like the best is yet to come. 송유진, Arirang News, 논산.
And on the subject of success stories, a group of granny rappers in a remote Korean county is garnering quite a bit of attention for proving it's never too late to learn. Our Park Gonu met up with them.
A community center in a small rural village of around 100 residents. This is where Suni and the Seven Princesses, a hip-hop group of women with an average age of 85, was formed 2 years ago. Overhearing joyful voices, I peeked inside.
안녕하세요. 뭐 하고 계셨어요?
한글 공부하고 있었어요.
Their life stories, woven into their lyrics, have brought fresh energy thanks to their regular Korean classes.
When I was young, I had to walk several kilometers to school because of the war, so I couldn't study. But learning Korean has opened my eyes.
They use fun methods like singing traditional Korean songs to improve. After class, they quickly transformed donning hip-hop gear and rapping like pros, a striking contrast to their Korean lessons.
The granny rappers show us that it's never too late to challenge yourself and speak your truth through your honest lyrics. Inspired by them, today I decided to try rapping. Together with the grannies, we send our message to our viewers. 우린 너무 행복해요. 여러분도 행복하세요. Everybody happy.
This group has offered hope and inspiration in South Korea, which turned into a super-age society last year with over 20% of the population aged 65 or older. Their success has even led to the creation of other elderly hip-hop groups. And they're boosting the local economy with merchandise featuring their faces, symbolizing the region. Their influence stretches beyond the local community, performing at venues nationwide and even spreading globally. A documentary about them, directed by a Polish filmmaker, is set to be released later this year. The filmmaker shared her inspiration behind the project.
The project is to show to the other people that we are limitless, that we can change our lives no matter in which age we are currently in. We shouldn't have any excuses for anything, right? She started the rapping band in that age, so that's really impressive.
As the filmmaker hopes, Suni and the Seven Princesses will continue spreading their powerful message.
It's incredible we've come this far. If we can do it at this age, young people can too.
Emphasizing that she's already very happy, she said her only wish is for her and the members to stay healthy. 박건우, Arirang News, 7곡.
This is The World Now, bringing you the latest stories from around the globe. In Israel, 3 buses exploded in Bat Yam just south of Tel Aviv on Thursday in what authorities are investigating as coordinated terror attacks. No casualties have been reported. The explosions on 3 empty buses parked approximately 500 meters apart happened within minutes of each other and are believed to have been caused by makeshift explosive devices equipped with timers. 2 bombs were discovered on other buses but were defused by police. A note was found with one of the unexploded devices, referencing revenge from Tulkarem, alluding to a recent Israeli military operation in the West Bank. In response to the incident, a temporary halt to all public transportation nationwide has been ordered to facilitate thorough investigations. Israel's internal security agency has taken over the investigation, and a search is underway for suspects. Meanwhile, Israel has received the bodies of what Hamas says are 4 hostages, including a mother and her 2 young children. But Israel says one of the bodies is of someone else. On Thursday, Hamas returned the remains of what were claimed to be Shiri Bibas, aged 32, and her 4-year-old and 9-month-old sons, along with Oded Lifshitz, an 84-year-old journalist. However, the Israel Defense Forces says that one of the sets of remains was not that of Shiri Bibas. The handover in Khan Yunis, Gaza, was marked by a provocative display by Palestinians with coffins covered with offensive imagery and anti-Israel slogans. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu condemned the scene, calling Hamas monsters for their actions. In Tel Aviv's Hostages Square, thousands gathered to mourn the dead hostages who were abducted during the October 2023 attacks. U.S. National Security Advisor Mike Waltz said on Thursday during a press conference at the White House that all NATO members should allocate at least 2% of their gross domestic product to defense spending, a standard set in 2014. The call to action comes ahead of the NATO summit slated for June, where defense budgets are expected to be a central topic of discussion. U.S. President Donald Trump has said that NATO member states should spend 5% of their GDP beyond the 2% guideline. Currently, 18 of NATO's 32 member countries meet or exceed the 2% GDP defense spending benchmark. However, several nations, including Canada, have yet to reach this target. In the United Kingdom, London Fashion Week Autumn-Winter 2025 has kicked off. The event, which runs until February 24th, features a mix of traditional runway shows and digital presentations encompassing both established and emerging designers. This season, the British Fashion Council has introduced sustainability requirements for brands, emphasizing the industry's commitment to environmental responsibility. Participants include Harris Reed, who opened the week with a showcase, while Burberry is set to close the event on Monday evening. A pop-up shop to commercially support designers will also run from February 22nd to 24th. Choi Ji-hee, Arirang News.
Ahead of the weekend, the winter cold continues nationwide, with cold wave warnings and advisories still in place. It was very cold this morning everywhere. The wind chill made it feel like it was below zero even during the day all over the country. It will stay cold this whole weekend. With freezing conditions, the air stays dry. In the East Coast areas where a dry weather warning is in effect, the wildfire crisis warning level was raised to caution level. Since gusty winds are blowing as well, please take extra precautions not to cause any wildfires. Tomorrow morning will start off at below 0 degrees nationwide, with Seoul at -7 degrees Celsius, Gwangju and Busan at -3 degrees. Daily highs will move up to 2 degrees in Seoul, 4 degrees in Daejeon. The weather will be as cold as today until the weekend, then ease off a bit starting from early next week. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Right, those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. Coming up right after this break is our daily panel session, and today we touch upon a host of social issues here that made international headlines.